I will take you with me. You might learn something.
About soccer?
Nah, mate. Not about soccer. And for fuck's sake, stop saying soccer!
I mean, you know, during the matches you have your moments. Okay, we have the equivalent of yellow cards and so on and so forth. But those are, that's what happens in life and so on. And you have those moments, and then they're dispelled. They just afterwards, everyone's shaking hands, and so it's a spirit that it's been in the Homeless World Cup since the beginning. I sometimes say, look, this is what the United Nations should be like. This is what the world should be like. These people should be running the world.
And later, the memories are much better than if you're only playing tournaments and maybe losing more games than winning. There was one player, one of his biggest aims was he never saw the ocean before, the sea. And he said, I want to see the ocean when I go to Australia. This was his main aim, yeah. And then we went, of course, in Melbourne is very close to the sea, and we went there, and it was one of his nicest memories in his life that he could see the first time the ocean and during the Homeless World Cup.
When I was in high school back in Austria, Sturm Graz, one of the two clubs of my hometown there, and the club that I was born into, had its most successful phase. We made it to the Champions League group phase twice, and then eventually we went bankrupt from it. But that's a different story. Anyways, one of the protagonists was a young, serious-looking player from our own youth system who was known to be, not your stereotypical soccer player. We knew that he had this love for languages and for philosophy. During the same period, also in Graz in 2003, the first Homeless World Cup took place on the city's main square. 18 nations, 8 homeless players each, street soccer style on a small pitch. The tournament, its founders argue, has the power to transform the lives of participants and shape attitudes toward homelessness. I'd argue it also has the power to recenter the attitudes of soccer fans like us toward the power that the beautiful game can have. The Homeless World Cup still exists today. The last tournament was played this year in Sacramento in California, and we will hear from one of these founders today, Mel Young, a social entrepreneur from Edinburgh, Scotland, who is president of the Homeless World Cup. And in 5 feature sections throughout the episode, we will also hear from that young, serious Sturm Graz player that I watched growing up. His name is Gilbert Prilasnig. He now coaches Sturm's under-18 team, but it turns out he began coaching Austria's Homeless World Cup national team already during his active career as a player. He still does so now, and I guess that makes him Austria's longest tenured national team coach ever. This episode is maybe as far off the beaten path of glamorous professional football you'd see on TV that I've gotten here. But I can do that because I don't depend on sponsors or clicks. However, the joy I get from this does depend partly on the community built of people who, like you, if you're listening to this, see football as more than a game and the fan as more than a spectator or a customer. If that is so, it's likely you know at least one other person like that. So let them know this podcast exists. And if you don't know another person like that, please, find one and also leave a rating or comment on your podcast app right now. It just takes a second and it really helps with visibility of what this podcast is trying to do, because there's a lot of loudmouths on soccer out there, and this podcast is rather niche. So welcome to the niche today with Mel Young and Gilbert Prilasnig.
It was 2004. Yeah, I was in England, yes, in Cambridge, and came back from Cambridge. Yeah, so it was a very difficult time in my career. So I was searching for a club which could fit for me, and had some problems in my career. So I had time to go to Gothenburg to the second Homeless World Cup in July 2004, I think it was, or was it in the beginning of August? And I could spend the whole week there. I immediately could feel the special atmosphere of the Homeless World Cup. It's serious football where the players really fight for their lives. You have the feeling that the motivation is even higher than in professional football if they're not paid well. But at the same time, there was a atmosphere you see that you could experience that football is not the most important thing it's just the second important thing in life, yeah, for all of the participants. That was really a nice experience for me, so I said, okay, I think I will try to follow this project even longer. That it will be almost 20 years, I couldn't imagine that time. The first homeless worker, we had to sleep in the classroom all together with mattresses, and so that was maybe a little bit of a culture shock for me after being in hotels all over the world, some of the best hotels. But at the meantime, I thought, that's really nice, because this was something, because the professional football, the life of a professional footballer is not the real world, you know, where you live in. It's just an illusion of a very fantastic world you are in. But so I could really experience real life, what I experienced maybe in my youth when we were still young, and went to skiing course and had very normal rooms. And there was a classroom with mattresses, and the whole team was there. I think that was something that really brought me down, because in this time of my career, I already felt that the career is going down, and the worst or the most difficult time of a footballer is the time after you stop playing. Yeah. And all of my colleagues, they say the same things to me.
Yeah, many fall hard. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I can say that I didn't fall hard. It was a very soft landing for me.
And that's partly due to the exposure of the homeless world.
Due to my experience in the homeless world cup. Yeah.
Welcome, Mel. You're the visiting professor of football today. Thank you for your time. Greetings to Scotland, where I assume you're at.
Yes, I'm in Edinburgh at the moment.
Edinburgh, beautiful town.
Yeah, it's lovely. Beautiful city.
Before we get started with the Homeless World Cup and the connection between soccer and social justice more broadly, could you tell me a little bit about how you got into this? What's your historic connection to football to begin with?
Well, I mean, I've always, like many people, I've just loved football since I was a kid, and went to watch football with my local football team, which is Hibernian. I went with friends, and that just became just a habit. But I just loved it, just being there, the whole crowd, and watching the team and everything. And then, of course, tried to play football or soccer, as you call it in the US, and was never particularly good in it, but I really enjoyed playing it. And then kind of followed Hibs around, and then by the 70s, so in my kind of late teens and so on, we had a pretty good team actually. They were almost won the league, and they were in Europe and so on. So it became just part of me. And then so I knew the power it had just in terms of pulling people together, I guess, and forming communities, and so I had an understanding and a love of the game.
We're in the Conference League qualifier this year, right?
They won 2 rounds, preliminary rounds. And then in the third round, they played Aston Villa and lost at home 5-0. Kind of difference in quality, probably something to do with the amount of huge difference in budget.
No, really? You think so?
I think so. I know so. But actually, Hibs are... they're quite an innovative football club because they were one of the founders of what is now the Champions League, which was the European Cup. They were one of the founding teams. And, in those days, they would play Barcelona and Real Madrid and beat them. So it's kind of changed days, but so Hibs being in Europe is not an unusual thing, although it has been unusual in recent years as the difference in the finances prove.
Your career trajectory, though, was different. You didn't get into football professionally. You had a number of other ventures, I think. What's your day-to-day? Well, I should say jobs, plural, probably. But what projects have you filled your adult life with?
Yeah, I was a journalist, but more. I think somebody once finally in about 2000 described me as a social entrepreneur. So that's what I am. And social entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs like business entrepreneurs, except they want to change the world around them. That's their profit motive rather than money. And so that was mine. And so combining my skill as journalists and publishers, when started the street paper in Scotland in 1993, which was basically homeless people selling the magazine and keeping the profit from the sales for themselves, and then we would be supporting them in terms of move on, so getting away from the streets. So it was a mechanism to help them get some stability, get some money, and hopefully move on out of homelessness. So then we created a network around the street papers, and because the model is actually quite simple, and other people followed it or copied it or worked with us on developing it. And we created this network of street papers. So I was in there, and that's how the Homeless World Cup emerged. So I maybe stopped at that point, but that was the kind of my background is about creating initiatives which are hopefully self-sustaining, but which are very impactful in terms of the social or indeed environmental outcomes.
The first but not the last plug, probably, to look out for those papers in your community or in a city near you. I grew up with the Megaphone in Graz in Austria. Closest to me now would be Streetwise in Chicago.
Yeah.
The Homeless World Cup itself is 20 years old this year. It dates back to 2003. The first one took place. What's the path from street newspapers to a soccer tournament? Not entirely intuitive at first.
Not entirely.
What's the journey there to starting something that is now global in reach to 2003? Yeah,
absolutely. So as I was saying earlier, we created this network of street papers where we basically were supporting one another. And then once a year, we'd come together. We didn't have much resources, but we'd at least get together somewhere in the world. And in 2001, we were in Cape Town in South Africa, and we had a great conference in terms of, we were inspiring each other, talking about how we could collaborate better, et cetera, et cetera. And it was very, very positive. And it was almost like we were giving each other an adrenaline hit for the next year, so that, because some of the work we were doing is very challenging. And so we come back in a year hence and for more recovery. But at the end of the conference, myself and Harold Schmidt, who is from Graz in Austria, were sitting talking over a beer. And we said, this is great conference, but there's no homeless people here. We're either editors of the paper or founders or directors or whatever. And whilst we're passionate about it, it would be really good if homeless people would be with us. And so we talked about how that might happen, and then with all sorts of issues emerged, like visa problems and other issues. And then and including language would be a problem as well. So Harold and I said, well, but there is an international language called football, and we started talking about football. And Harold had a similar love of football, like myself, and he played a bit. He'd been a semi-professional, and so we over a beer we started to say, well, maybe a way around this is, there's a team of our sellers, street paper sellers in Scotland, muck around with the football, and we could make them into a team, and they would be Scotland. And Harold said, oh, well, we could do the same in Graz in Austria, and they could be Austria. So over the beer, we shook hands and said, right, okay, there's going to be this game between Scotland and Austria. And I said, look, Scotland will win because we don't win very much, but we'll beat you guys, okay? And he said, don't be so cocky. We'll win. So we were mucking around and having a good time. And then we had another couple of glasses of beer, and to be quite honest, but we started getting very creative. It just wasn't just Scotland Austria who were going to participate, but it was all the countries in the world. And so we had this great conversation. And sometimes when we tell that story, I mean, that's the beginning, and that is the beginning of the journey. But actually, the critical decision was the next morning. We met again at breakfast in the hotel, and we said, "Hey, that was a great conversation. Will we leave it in the bar? Because you can do that sometimes. You can have these great conversations, and they just stay there, and they were nice conversations. Or will we do it?" And at the breakfast, we said, "No, let's do it." And it did take place about 18 months later in Graz in Austria.
18 nations participated in the first Homeless World Cup in Graz in 2003. That's not a small feat. It really is a little World Cup. World Cups back then at 32 nations. You were at 18. How did you organize all of this?
We spent 18 months organizing. There's lots of kind of stories there about Harold, because we managed to get to Graz. It became Graz apart from Harold's home town, but it was the European Year of Culture, and Harold managed to convince the city authorities. Initially, they were very skeptical because, of course, we hadn't had it before; it never happened. And he said there was all sorts of other things going on as part of culture, like opera and ballet and art and so on. And he kept saying, like, "Yeah, but you need to do something else that's maybe slightly different." And eventually he convinced them. So because we became part of that, you kind of got support in terms of maybe marketing or PR or whatever from the Year of Culture in Graz. So that was the big tick. And on my side, I was kind of working on the international, trying to get international sponsors and looking at the teams that might come from other countries, which at that time were from our street papers. So we put it together, and Graz was incredibly welcoming. I mean, it was just brilliant. And we didn't really know what was going to happen, to be honest, because we'd invented this event in street soccer and built a stand in the city centre, and it was amazing. So homeless people were changing in front of our eyes, kind of standing up, singing the national anthem proudly. People turned up to watch and cheer them. So this was homeless people. I remember the Dutch team walking towards the stadium to play, and people standing in the streets applauding. This is applauding homeless people. And then the world's media kind of turned up and wrote positively, 100% positively, when the media is normally negative. So it was a very, very special event. And then, of course, football wonderfully contrives to make things happen. Sport does this, it's just beautiful. It creates the romantic.
We do have to say who won the first Homeless World Cup. It was my home country, Austria. So on the pitch, how did the tournament go?
There were two sections, qualifying groups, and Scotland played Austria in the qualifying group. And Harold and I were there, and we were pictured there, of course, because this was the original discussion. And Scotland won this game, actually, but
yes,
lost another couple, and Austria qualified to get through. And then Austria played England in the final and won. So Austria won a home game, and the place was going crazy. It was an amazing moment, and I was so pleased for Harold, and it was a deserving victory, but it was a fantastic moment. I'll never forget it. It was just amazing.
In the training camps, we tried to focus, of course, on the football game on the pitch, because there are some special rules on the street soccer, in the street soccer game. But also we try to work hard on building new aims for the players after the Homeless World Cup, because you're only allowed to play once, to participate once at the Homeless World Cup. It's not allowed to play twice or more times. So after you get one chance to participate at the Homeless World Cup, to get new experiences, new self-confidence, new friends, whatever. And then you have to have new aims to focus on. Yeah. And that's what we really try hard to do. Yeah, it doesn't matter which passport you have. It doesn't matter. It's there were some discussions that they said, well, you should have at least 6 players with your own nationality, and all the countries said no, that's not really what they think the idea of the Homeless World Cup should be.
Yeah.
So, for example, when Austria was world champion in 2003, all the players, they came from Nigeria.
I was going to ask because I remember quite a few megaphone sellers who were Nigerian. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And that was very funny because all players with African races but the crowd was really crazy when they played for Austria and they were celebrating with them. So it was really nice atmosphere at the Homeless World Cup 2003, as it is at all the Homeless World Cups, what I have experienced so far.
So Austria wins the final 2-1 against England. Netherlands come in third. We need to say a little bit about how a game at the Homeless World Cup looks like now. It's not 11 against 11. There's a slightly different format. And then the other question I had, how do you find host cities that are willing to host this in public, and what does the setup involve?
Sure. So we invented the, and Harold had a huge impact on this, a smaller sided game for various reasons. One of which was we were thinking about where homeless people were and how they would respond. So taking them from where they were to a big pitch, 11-a-side pitch, was practically quite difficult. So we wanted to create spaces where they were, which was mainly in city centres. So we created a game which was smaller sided, and then invented rules which made the game shorter. And that was partly because, at the time, a lot of homeless people weren't particularly fit. So playing for 90 minutes was maybe more of a challenge, and so on. So for all of these reasons, we created this game. It's a very simple game, smaller sided pitches. There's 7 minutes each way with a minute in between. It's a very fast paced game. I've seen teams being 3 goals ahead with one game I saw with 30 seconds to go and lose 4 goals. And part of the reason that it works with the homeless people is that, and a lot of people say that, see, as soon as the game starts, you forget the people are homeless. And I'm saying, well, that's the point. And people get into this really, really fast paced game. So it becomes very, very exciting. The other thing that we have as part of this is that it's a week-long tournament, and if you lose a game, you don't go home. Okay, you stay, and you find your own level over time. So that by the end of the week, 16th playing against 15th, 14th playing against 13th, and so on. So some of our teams are not so good, and some of our teams are very, very good. And so by the end of the tournament, you've got the good teams playing against each other and the not so good teams playing against each other, and they're all then kind of fairly equal. And people kind of really respond to that. They understand what's going on and support all the teams in different ways. So we create an event which is competitive, and it's very important it's competitive. So we're not being patronizing at all to the players, saying they want to win, okay? As if they were footballers, but everybody gets the same medal at the end. You get different cups, but the same medal. So as a game, it's important to us. We have international referees.
How many teams normally participate? Just to give us an idea.
Well, when we started at the beginning, there was kind of 16 teams. And now you would have 64 teams because of our men's and women's tournaments. So we have 48 countries in the men's and 16 in the women. But given that we're going into more countries, there possibly be more. And each team during the week will play about 13 or 14 games. To play it at the higher level, you have to be really fit. It's we've had professional footballers who tried it and go, God, that is really, really tough because you're moving all the time. And the way we've developed it, because we've developed the rules since Graz, you always have to have one player in the offensive half. And basically what that means is you can get 3-on-2 because it's 4 aside, 1 goalkeeper and 3 out. You can get the 3-on-2 very quickly. So a goalkeeper can concede a goal, flick the ball back into play, then you get your 3-on-2, and then 1 second later they've scored again. So it's very, very fast. But to be able to do that at the top level, you have to be very fit. So that's what we're encouraging homeless people to do. A lot of them had some drug problems, etc., in the background, and their health's been affected. And as a result of getting involved, their health's changing. So to your second question, really we have a system where cities bid to host it. Graz, we Harold in particular persuaded Graz to host it in 2003. But since then, cities indicate that they want to host it. We have a mechanism, which is a bit like anything else. It's a bit like when you want FIFA World Cup to come to your city or country, or the Olympics or whatever. It's similar process, and we'll have certain criteria, like have we been there before, what are the facilities, what are visa requirements, etc., and basically we'll just look at these in a transparent kind of way and share it with everyone and make a decision.
And players, I mean, a list of participating countries includes countries like Cambodia, the classic football nations as well, but there's Hong Kong, there's Indonesia, there's Liberia, there's Afghanistan that actually won once. How do people find each other? Homeless people that want to play, that want to participate. How do coaches get found? What does all that involve?
Well, we first of all on the homeless people themselves, it's once again it's quite a straightforward process, but that first step is very important. We simply go, if you like, into the street to where homeless people are, or in some countries they might be in shelters, or certain charities might be looking after them or whatever, and simply say to them, do you want to play football? And by the way, it's now, and here's the ball. Do you want to come? And that's very important, that, because it's not we're saying we need to take you to a pitch miles away, just come now. And then we just let everybody kick a ball around. And then at the end of it, we're saying, do you want to come back again? We don't comment on their state. We don't talk about homelessness. We don't talk about how good or bad they might be at the game. We just want them to come back, so they start to get into a habit of joining in. And then we begin working with them in terms of the coaching, but also pathways out of their situation with homelessness, always using the football as the center point, the soccer as the center point, where they come back. So we're creating, if you like, a kind of family atmosphere around the team, where there's a bit of obligation on the homeless person. So you're the goalie, you need to come next week because you're the goalie. If we don't have a good goalie.
There is a movie about the Homeless World Cup team of Austria in 2008. Yeah? This movie is called Kick Off, and is made by a director called Hüseyin Tabak. Yeah? And this movie was in the cinemas also in Austria. And in this movie, the Homeless World Cup 2008 in Melbourne, Australia, we had a goalkeeper. Eh? The goalkeeper, he came into the team, I think 2 weeks before we went to Australia, because we had one goalkeeper. So the team was already fixed for a couple of months. The Homeless World Cup took place in December. We formed the team, I think, in May or June. So we had already the team, a lot of preparation activities. And then the goalkeeper said, no, he doesn't want to fly to Australia because it's not so easy if you have never sit in an airplane to fly to Australia. And you can smoke for many, many hours and things like that. So we had to find a keeper. And the keeper we found, he was very motivated, but he wasn't really in a good shape, especially as far as his private situation was concerned. But I realized immediately that he learned quickly. When we went to Australia, he played a really fantastic tournament. It was really a fantastic keeper. The movie team, he made an interview with him. And in this movie, you can see an interview which is really heartbreaking. Because for all of us, it was very new. He told us that he has a son, but he can't see his son. The mother doesn't let him because his life is shit no more. But now he experienced and he realized that he has power to reach aims if he has some. So, and he reached to come. He could manage to come to Australia to play in the Homeless World Cups. Now he knows that he can manage to reach a lot of other things as well. And one of his big aims is to find a job and to see his son again. We know that he left Vienna into his hometown, and he had a job there for many years. And actually, I'm not in touch with him anymore. But I think he also had contact with his son as well. So this was a really nice story. Yeah. And but the second story is a little bit different because it was also a keeper in 2016 in Glasgow. The keeper playing there, Oliver, he's now my assistant coach in the Homeless World Cup.
Okay.
Because in that time we already had much more professional structure in our organization. So after the Homeless World Cup, we had sponsors who offered jobs to the participants who offer, and he got a job at one sponsor. And he also made a course for coaching course. Health coaching course was called, and with this stable job he had and the coaching course, he started to work in football in a Caritas organization in Vienna. He's from Vienna, and we said, okay, my assistant coach, he already said before this tournament that it will be his last one. He was with me, I think, 13 years or so. And then he said, okay, we can take Oliver. And Oliver is still my assistant coach and has still a stable job in Vienna, has a family, and is now clean. He was drug addicted. He's now clean for, I think, 8 years or so. Mm-hmm. And 100% clean. This is really a fantastic story.
I assume that I have quite a few listeners who are privileged enough to pay for a soccer club fee for themselves or for children. Do you have a story of how players were found?
We have so many anecdotal stories, but I was in Austin, Texas, and there was a street soccer program starting there at the time, and we were going into this hall. And this homeless guy was asleep in front of the doorway. Okay, so we had to wake him up, and he wasn't very pleased. Nobody was pleased about being woken up, but he didn't like it. And we said, "Yeah, but we need to get into the door," and so on and so forth. Then we said, "Well, why don't you come and join in?" And no, I don't like soccer. I've never played it. I don't care. I don't want to do this. So we said, "Well, why don't you come and watch?" And so he was persuaded eventually to come and watch and have a cup of coffee and so on. And then we said, well, why don't you just come on at the pitch and join in? And he was kind of not so interested, but I said to him, okay, if I go, will you come? Okay. So, okay then. So, because I was kind of older guy. So he starts kicking the ball around, and then within 5 minutes, he's running all over the place and absolutely having a ball. And then at the end afterwards, he says to me, when's the next game? I want to play again. Are you coming here tomorrow, kind of thing?
What about conflicts on the pitch? For example, what is the role of a referee in a tournament like this?
when I sometimes do talks, I kind of start by saying, "Hey, how can a football referee end homelessness?" People look at me completely blankly and go, "Oh, nobody knows." And then I kind of tell this story. I'm saying it's about, this is the world of football. So we just do football. So just be a referee, and then you can create a change. You don't have to do huge things. We do small things. We create change, and then everybody gets it. And so it's almost like I think we've got too many referees now, but it's a good problem to have.
Former players, professional or semi-professional soccer players, certainly are not immune from homelessness either. Have they found themselves in teams at the Homeless World Cup as well? So is there some pro or semi-pro experience on the pitch as well at times?
There can be. I get often asked this question. I mean, I think we've had one or two who I wouldn't have said were particularly well-known household names of players, but certainly players who've almost made it, if you like, and maybe were kind of semi-pro, and who are homeless. Therefore, they fit the criteria. They are homeless, and just because they were previous players, then we get a difference. But we sometimes get asked if we have kind of ringers in the team that some team who wants to win can get a professional player and pretend to be homeless. And that never happens. And that never happens.
Okay.
Never happens, because the first people to shout about that will be the homeless people themselves, because you've just taken their place. So they all want to represent their country. So they'll be first to go, that guy or that woman is not homeless. And we would pick them out. And anyway, it's just not within the spirit of what was going on, and you'd spot it right away. So that doesn't happen. People ask us about that, but we have had one or two who are genuinely homeless now, who'd previously been semi-professional players.
You added a women's tournament as well in 2008, and now they are run, I assume, parallel to each other. Has the experience there been different than with the men's teams, or was it basically replicating and plugging into a structure you already had for the women? By the way, Zambia is the first winner of the Women's Homeless World Cup.
Yes. Well, we had long discussions about this in the early days. So we had, to start with, you could be male or female in the team. So it was mixed teams, but mainly it was men, 90%. And indeed, if we're being honest, we in the early days, we focused on young men because working with women, we could get them to move on to, get them involved in other projects. But some men, particularly young guys, wouldn't move on anything until you said, you want to play football? And they'd say, okay, we'll play football. So our focus was on there. But that didn't mean that women couldn't play. Indeed, they could. In fact, one of the early events we had, the player of the tournament was a Brazilian woman who was superb. But then we had a long discussions about how could we get more women involved in terms of moving away from the 90%, 10%. And we talked about ideas like you had to have 50-50 in your team, 50% men and women. Some people pushed back against that because they said we have nothing against that, but it wouldn't work in terms of the dynamics of our work on the ground, and which is very delicate, and you're dealing with vulnerable people and wouldn't necessarily work. So we created the women's only event as a kind of experiment, as you say, in 2008, and Zambia won, and it was very successful. Then we skipped a year, and then we've kept doing the women's event, which is basically a replica of what we've done before. We don't really change it. The rules are exactly the same. You don't go home, etc., etc. And currently, the Latin American teams are dominating this. Mexico, I think, has won it now 17.
I was just going to ask, why is Mexico so good? Four-time champion with the men, and I think 7 times or so with the women. What's going on in Mexico?
Well, one of the reasons is they've got a lot to pick from, because they're probably the biggest partner we have in terms of numbers. They work with about 30,000 a year across their 30 or 31 regions, where they have a competition in each, and then they select it. So if nothing else, they've got more to pick from. but secondly, I think that they've got a very good coaching system, so that pick up from the early days, and they've got psychologists working with them, and molding them into a team, and they have a view that they kind of want to win. It's interesting that in some countries the winning bit is more important than other countries. So, in the early days, particularly when Mexico won the tournament, they went back with a cup. They were met at the airport with people. They got taken to the president to meet the president. It was a huge, huge thing for Mexico. And as a consequence of that, it was influencing thousands of other people around and encouraging them to get involved in projects and get away from drug gangs and so on and so forth. And so they were using the football more than, say, a European country, which winning would be, they'd want to win, but actually the significance of it in terms of the impact wouldn't be so great, if you like. So I think there's a combination of reasons there that make Mexico definitely, in terms of the football anyway, the best team. They're the team to beat. The main loss this year, they lost to Chile, but again, it's another Latin American country, and they're very passionate about football. There was some great games. Brazil are very good at it as well, unsurprisingly. But, we've had, as I think you mentioned earlier, we've had not the usual suspects won it. Afghanistan won it in a fantastic game. Yes, Afghanistan in Melbourne when they beat Russia. And it was, once again, you see sport contrives, creates a final, Russia against Afghanistan. Afghanistan weren't necessarily the best team through the tournament. They kept on kind of going to penalty shootouts, which we have, and just winning, and then getting through, and then just winning. And then they get to the final, and they're not the favorites. And Russia are the big favorites. And Afghanistan play really well. They're a goal ahead with about, 15 seconds to go. And Russia have this open goal to equalize, and they miss. And Afghanistan won. The place was absolutely crazy. It was another amazing moment. So Afghanistan have won it. Ukraine have won it.
Even Scotland won it. It's a very exotic country as well. Yeah. I
was going to say, well, we think we're a great football country, of course, but as every country does. But we've won it twice, actually. Won it twice.
Sorry.
And both times, again, a bit like Afghanistan, we weren't the favourites. And I think that's how, when Scotland perform well, we never the favourites. When we get to be favourites, we lose. So, they when they first won it in Denmark, they were playing Poland. And I remember the night before, people saying, well, it's only how much you'll lose by. Poland were a very strong team, but Scotland were better coached. They just played them rather than the strong game. They played them at football by passing the ball and working out how they were going to win the game, and they won the game quite easily in the end. And then they won in Paris where they beat Mexico, which was unusual.
You're the under-18 coach right now.
Yeah.
You have a team full of boys, young men, that aspire to be professional football players and that aspire to live the life that you called an illusion. What could they learn from the players that you coach at the Homeless World Cup?
I think if you play at a club like Sturm Graz or Red Bull Salzburg or Bayern München in Germany, it doesn't matter, Rapid Vienna, all professional coaches were the youth players training 6 times a week, and they play games on the weekend, and they're already well known in school. They're quite of stars in the school if they still go to school, if they still attend school, and they have all the facilities you boys are dreaming, or also girls are dreaming about when they want to become football players. For example, we work with tracking systems, we work with video analysis, we work with I don't know, we have 30 balls at one coaching session and so on.
Right.
Yeah. For example. So I think they can learn, always to have an eye and a sensor also in what is real life. It's not everything like they experience it almost every day. Yeah. Or like I experienced it for almost 20 years. Yeah. But 10 years I was really on top level, and I just traveling from one game to the other, from one hotel to the other, and everybody was so famous that in Austria everybody knew me when I showed up somewhere. So this is something which can produce illusions in your mind. And I think that's what my academy team players can learn from it. From time to time, we show them the movie Kickoff. The chief of the academy, he also is a fan of the Homeless World Cup project. Actually, it was the movie 2008 who was in the cinemas, and I was in Graz at that time, and the Academy of Sturm Graz. All the players went into the movie, into the cinema to watch this movie, and that was the reason why I got my job at Sturm Graz later.
Not your career at the club, but what you did after your career
No,
at the
because
club.
they were searching for guy who can lead the youth section.
Yeah.
And this guy is still the academy chief. He said, okay, if he's doing the homeless work, he's coaching the homeless worker team, he must have enough social skills to lead our youth section. That's what he told me. Yeah, what his motivation was.
Yeah. Well, you talked about access a little bit, how these players get found or find football, keep coming. What are the barriers to participation? Both the barriers that are inherent in how homelessness is structured throughout the world, but also the barriers that you want to keep in place as a tournament, i.e., how do you qualify who is a homeless person and who isn't, and who gets to play and who doesn't? How did you figure that out?
It wasn't easy to begin with. Actually, we spent a lot of time talking about this. We tried initially to have an international definition for homelessness. So first of all, it was very clear for us you had to be homeless. Okay, that was the criteria. But then when you start digging into it, what's the definition of homelessness? And there's different definitions depending on where you are. And in some countries, even they don't have the word or say they don't have the word. Okay. So we spent a long time, I think just almost a week intensively trying to write down the definition, okay, about who could play and who couldn't play. And then we gave up. We said, this is impossible. We're not going to get anywhere. So the way we do it is that players can play if they fit the definition of homelessness in their country. So in England, for example, you can be homeless if you're in a homeless shelter. So you have a shelter as well as being on the street, etc. Whereas in some African countries, if you have any shelter over your head, you're not homeless. So we have simply gone by the definition of homelessness in the country where the players come from.
Okay.
And then we trust that those criteria are being applied by our partners, and they are generally. And then the teams come together under these different definitions. And is it perfect? No, it's not. But it's as near as perfect as you'll get it, actually. And it's worked for us all the time we've done it. There's never been any complaints or issues about this, or people saying that they've got a bigger pool of people because there's a different criteria. No one's ever said that. It's simply a trust. And it's interesting to me that the biggest respect is amongst the homeless players themselves. They can't speak the same language. They're from different cultures, but they almost know where they all come from. They look each other in the eye and they kind of go, yeah, well, you're excluded in your country. So am I. That's the bond between us. That's what we understand. And football's the language, and we'll play that together. And so, as I say, this whole thing's not perfect, but it works.
How's the contact been then between homeless teams off the pitch at these tournaments? What's the vibe? What's the atmosphere? How would you describe it?
I would describe the atmosphere as just one of kind of joy, and it's just incredible, to be quite honest, because in many ways, the homeless people have absolutely right to be really angry about the situation, which in many cases has been caused by government policies or society, and they're the complete opposite. From the moment they arrive, it's their moment, if you like, their great achievement to represent their country, which is what they're doing. In the first games, we play the national anthem, and they sing the national anthem with such pride, singing it. The games are played competitively, but in a fair way. And so afterwards, the teams are shaking hands and embracing each other. Then in the evening afterwards, we will have certain things we'll do together, like there'll be a barbecue and so on. And usually the players start dancing. South Africans usually start dancing. The Brazilians start singing or whatever, and everybody else starts joining in. And there's this fantastic kind of party atmosphere, if you like, between the players. And it's just quite amazing. It's magnetic. If you come into it, it's like, wow, what is going on here? And to me, it's what sport should be like. This is what sport is about. So when you go out in the field, you're going to win. Afterwards, you're all friends, and we're going to party together. And so they do that. And I remember one time, in 2019, we had this big tent off where the players went to kind of relax by the pitches, and it had been raining, so we had to stop for a little while. So all the teams were in the tent, and I was taking somebody who's an ambassador around to show the players. And I said, "We come and see where they all kind of meet." We went in, and they were created all this music themselves, and the whole place was dancing. This was about 12 o'clock at midday. Everybody is dancing and singing. I'm going, well, this is us. And the person I was showing, this is amazing. This is incredible. What's going on here? So, I mean, during the matches, you have your moments. Okay, we have the equivalent of yellow cards and so on and so forth. But those are. That's what happens in life and so on. And you have those moments, and then they're dispelled. Just afterwards, everyone's shaking hands. And so it's a spirit that has been in the Homeless World Cup since the beginning. I sometimes say, look, this is what the United Nations should be like. This is what the world should be like. These people should be running the world, because it would be a much better place if we were sharing this kind of spirit and these values. We wouldn't have any problem. So how do we make that happen? So it's very, very special, and it rubs off on the crowd as well, because sometimes we get big crowd. We had in Mexico when we were there, we had over 160,000 people came to watch over the 8 days, and they just get completely embroiled in it. There's not only the football that's going on, which can be very exciting, but it's just the atmosphere. The players create an atmosphere that rubs off on the crowd, and they get into it as well. So it kind of spins off itself, and the crowds are always cheering the homeless guys. They almost become heroes. So I'd always say to people, I can't sometimes articulate kind of what's going on. There's something really special happening. Yeah. I say to people, just if you get an opportunity, come along and watch, and then you'll get it.
I mean, in my shorter life experience, it's always been easier to find shared humanity with others when it's clear that there's a lot that I don't have power over. And that is a feeling that I think many homeless people are quite familiar with, and that might come through there. It's beautiful to hear what you're describing.
thank you for an inspiring hour that offers a very different lens on football, on what soccer can do to society, and what society does to soccer as well.
No problem.
Through the lens of the Homeless World Cup.
Delighted. Really good to speak to you. Thanks for taking the time and doing the podcast. Fabulous to meet somebody who was in at the original Homeless World Cup as well. So good talking to you about that. There's an immediate bond there, because kind of immediate understanding. So good to talk to you.
Thank you, Mel. Thanks a lot. All the best for your future work, and I'll make sure I'll let listeners know when we know where the 24 World Cup is played.
Please do. That will be fabulous. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Mel.
As long as I can do it beside my job, as a football coach in academies, I probably will do it. If the organization is still developing, if I have the feeling, well, there's still development and things going on, because in 2017 I got the human right prize.
Yes, Human Rights Award. I was going to say that in your
Human Rights Award, yes. 2017 I got the Human Rights Award from the city of Graz for that, and that's of course not only an honor, but also a duty to go on with the work. So, but if I will maybe sometimes doing a job as a professional football coach, I will not be able to do the Homeless World Cup, of course, in this form, in this form as the coach. Maybe I can do something else for the Homeless World Cup, but not to coach not be the coach of the team. Yeah, of course.
I haven't decided what's next. Either an episode on the football or soccer jersey, the shirt. When did these shirts start? How do clubs pick them or get stuck with them? When did they become the commercial and design article that they are today? Or an episode that's a bit of historical myth busting on one of the most prominent Austrian footballers right before and then briefly during the Nazi regime. I'm kind of leaning toward the former, because we did 2 episodes of kind of deep history on the German Democratic Republic and on Bayern Munich already. But you could let me know what you prefer to be next. Use the link in the show notes and leave an easy voice message. I promise it's just 2 clicks, and I would love to get your feedback or additional info you have if I got something wrong, or just greetings. Thank you for spending an hour with me and with Mel and with Gilbert. I do not take it for granted.